Hello, Thursday party people, unless you're watching the playback, in which case it could be any day. Um, Another Scrimba live interview today. Looking forward to this one because we're talking about a very hot topic, artificial intelligence, also known as AI. And I'm joined by Tom, the Scrimba tutor, who has just dropped a brand new AI course. Yes, we are hot off the press with this, went live yesterday. Teaches you, it assumes no previous knowledge of AI, and it teaches you how to build 3 apps integrated with various different types of AI. We're going to be hearing a lot more about that a bit later. Well, thanks for joining us, Tom. How are you feeling today?
My pleasure. Yep, feeling good. Feeling good.
Brilliant. Let's start a bit then with talking about this course, what it is, who it's aimed at, and what people build. Dropping the link into the chat now if you want to go and check it out, completely free on Scrimba. Yeah, what's the background of this, Tom, and what do people do in the course?
Yeah, okay. So basically, obviously, OpenAI have been around a while now, and they've been releasing AI products for the last couple of years that have been pretty decent. But last autumn, I suppose it was around October time, things kind of went crazy when they released ChatGPT basically and Dall-E, and suddenly everybody was talking about AI and really recognizing that we're kind of on the threshold of a future that we don't really know anything about, and I think we'll probably talk a little bit later about like what that means for us and for everybody. But this course is all about using the OpenAI API, and the OpenAI API allows you to make use of the OpenAI models in your own applications. And that's incredibly powerful because it just means that you can do so much cool stuff, like image generation, like being creative, checking your code, doing sentiment analysis where you figure out if somebody was being happy or sad or angry. There's just so many applications of it. And the important thing about this course is that it's there for the complete beginner. Honestly, if you know a bit of JavaScript, that's enough. This course, it actually, there's not actually that much JavaScript in the course, to be honest. I mean, it is obviously web-based, so it's got HTML, CSS, and JavaScript in it. But really, all you need to worry about is a fetch request. And even if you haven't used a fetch request before, all you really need to do is understand the idea of a fetch request. And then pretty much instantly, you can get to work on integrating artificial intelligence in your apps. And it's, there's a bit of a process for sure, but it really is something that's incredibly accessible, even to relatively new developers. So what we do with this course is we start off with the very basics, and we take one of the, we take a GPT 3.5 model. And for those of you that don't know about the OpenAI models, there are plenty of them. They overlap to some extent. Some of them are aimed to do one sort of particular area more than others. But in the first course, what we concentrate on is getting the OpenAI API. I so many times when I was recording that course, I had to say OpenAI API, and it's actually a real tongue twister. But basically getting the API working. And that first course is actually all about the sort of creative power of OpenAI, because it's actually quite shocking almost how good the OpenAI API is, or just OpenAI in general is, at producing human quality language. So in that first course, we use the API, we make several requests to the API. A lot of them are asking for language and generating human level language. And we also work there a little bit with the image generating API. So a lot of people will have used the Dall-E app, which is obviously, well, I was going to say freely available. You have to use some of your AI credits when you use it, but and that also has an API, so you can do image generation right there in your apps, which is really, really cool. So all of that is kind of included in the first project. Now, after that, we move on to chatbots, and we actually do two things with chatbots. We're doing that really because I think probably the most common thing that you see as a web developer or just as a website user using artificial intelligence is chatbots. And there are many, many other applications, and maybe we'll talk about them a bit later. But I think the sort of the chatbot or the assistant that pops up in the corner of the website is such a common use that really we couldn't not include it. So the second project is just a general use chatbot. It just answers your questions. It uses the newest model at the time of recording, very, very new out, the GPT-4 model, which is great. It's incredibly fast. It produces incredible language. It really, it really kind of is already a step up from the stuff that we thought was really amazing back in December, sort of thing. So that gets us kind of the basics of the chatbot. And then what we do in the final project is
this one.
Called fine tuning. And fine tuning is a really, really key skill, I think, because whatever happens with models and syntax, which will change over time, a lot of the time when you're working as a developer with AI, you're not going to be just wanting to ask it sort of general questions. What's really likely is that you'll be working for a specific organization, let's say a company, and that company will have some specific data, for example, for customer service. And of course, that company has all of its own ways of doing things. It's shipping fees, it's handling charges, it's opening hours, it's phone numbers, it's email addresses, it's hierarchy within the organization. And what you want to be able to do is to train an AI model on specifically that data, so that the chatbot, instead of just knowing everything like the first project, it knows specifically about your company or your organization. Or, you know, perhaps you're a massive fan of Star Wars films and you want to train a chatbot on a ton of data that you've scraped from millions of fan sites about Star Wars. That's the idea, that you're able to really focus in artificial intelligence, train it on some data, and then, well, exploit that data in whichever way you want. We're doing it with a chatbot because, as I say, I think that's a very, very common way of doing it. So that's what we go through in the course. So we're mostly working with the two newer models. And on top of that, we do a few extra things. And one thing actually that I think is really, really useful is we do look at deployment as well, because when you're working with the OpenAI API, you get an API key. And although you get a bunch of free credit when you sign up, obviously that doesn't last forever. You don't want to share your API key. You want to keep your API key secret and hidden. And that is a bit of a problem, as all front-end developers know. When you've used an API as a front-end developer, you tend to end up with the API key right there in your code. And that just means that anybody can open up the dev tools, they go to the network tab, and they see your API key right there. It's compromised. They can take it, they can use it, they can run up a bill on your account or use up all your free credit or whatever. So in this project, we look at using Netlify to secure the API key on the back end. And we look at how we can do that so as it's absolutely not visible to the user. And therefore you can share your projects and control how much of your own credit is used without fear of compromising your key. So that's just it's not specific to OpenAI at all, but it's an extra in the course, which I think is just really, really useful for anybody working with APIs.
Yeah, definitely is. I think that's something many developers have had a big worry about at some point, myself included. Not so long ago, actually, a couple of live streams ago. So worth taking the course just for that, let alone all the other brilliant knowledge you'll pick up there. And what I find really interesting is you're doing all of this stuff which sounds pretty advanced, fine-tuning a chatbot and everything, but you're saying, Tom, that you actually don't need that much JavaScript even. In fact, the 2 prerequisite courses we've put in there are our free HTML and CSS and our free JavaScript course. So if you've done those, you're good to go.
Absolutely, yeah. The only thing you might need to do is read up a little bit on fetch requests, as I say, but you don't need a really, really deep knowledge of that. And a lot of the stuff, the fine tuning, for example, we have to work with the terminal for that, the command prompt. For a lot of people, when they just open that screen and they get this sort of dodgy little cursor and they have to actually start sort of typing things in that, they feel really uncomfortable with it. OpenAI have created this tool which you just install, and then it's actually pretty simple. There's maybe 5 or 6 commands we use, and nobody would know them off by heart. I couldn't just pluck them out of my head, even though I've been using them for the last few months. So it's just a question of understanding them, knowing what they do, knowing where the docs are if you need help, and going for it. And the tools really do a lot of the heavy lifting. And likewise, in the course, we move very, very quickly to use the OpenAI dependency, which you can install really easily in Scrimba. And if you're working in VS Code, you can install it via npm really, really quickly. And again, that does so much heavy lifting that the actual code that you need to get your hands on really, really powerful artificial intelligence is just a handful of lines. It's virtually nothing. So yeah, incredibly accessible. And everyone, I think, particularly people who are looking to get a job in the world of web development or coding in general, whether that's full stack, front end, or what have you, I just think it's really, really important that AI goes on that never-ending list of things that you should know a bit about.
Yeah, super cool. And I think that's going to be comforting for people to hear, because the tendency is when you hear AI to think, oh boy, that sounds intimidating. But from the way you've described it, it's not. So go and check it out. Tom's brand new course just dropped yesterday. All sounds very exciting. Vladislav, nice course. He started the first module. Very interesting to work with AI. Super cool. Yes. Quick question from Daryl. Can fetch requests be used with React? I think
Yes,
they can, can't they?
Absolutely. Yeah. This course, we decided to make it using vanilla JavaScript because as we've said now sort of several times, there's not too much code in it. It's very, very accessible. And we just thought if we made it in React, we're kind of limiting the people who would be able to use the course just by adding that complexity. But absolutely, you can use regular fetch requests in React, and you can use the OpenAI dependency, which, as I say, makes everything just a little bit more concise and a bit easier in React as well. No problem at all.
Yeah.
And in fact, yeah, if you're putting together something for a portfolio project, I think it's really, really good to use a library or a framework of some kind just to, show off another skill. Why not?
Yeah, that's it. If you know a bit of React, then maybe you want to convert some of the projects from this course into React or any other framework you might know, and then you can put that on your portfolio. So good question there. Dallas, howdy everyone. Looking forward to taking this course soon. Gina says, love your lessons, Tom.
Thank you, Gina.
Brilliant. Good luck with the course. Harish, this is an interesting question. Do we need ChatGPT-4 for this?
Really good question. GPT-4, but there's 2 good questions. I mean, there's a whole kind of alphabety spaghetti of stuff flying around with OpenAI, right? There's ChatGPT, there's GPT-4, there's GPT-4 3.5, which is actually arguably part of ChatGPT and GPT-4 isn't part of ChatGPT. There's a whole kind of palaver about what to call things. But I think from the question, you're asking about GPT-4. And that's a very, very good question. At the moment, there is a waiting list for GPT-4. And no, it's not necessary because the project that we build with GPT-4 in this course, and I do make the point in the course at the beginning as well as just before that part of the course, the syntax is absolutely identical to GPT 3.5. GPT 3.5 is part of the general API. Anybody can get their hands on it instantly. The syntax is exactly the same. The performance is honestly, I mean, the 3.5 is very, very good. 4 is better, but honestly, for a lot of things, you won't really notice the difference. I think 4 is also a little bit faster. And I believe 4 is also quite a lot cheaper at the moment in terms of how much credit you use. But what I suggest in the course is that you join the waiting list at the beginning. And if you've got your hands on a GPT-4 by that time, perfect. If you haven't, doesn't matter at all. Use 3.5 and you can always just literally, you're just changing GPT 3.5 for GPT-4 in the code at a later date, and all your apps will work exactly the same, unless OpenAI pull the rug from under our feet and change something. And I did actually, I recorded the course using 3.5, and then pretty much 3 days after that, they released 4, and I re-recorded it with 4 because I wanted to have the most cutting edge technology available. But yeah, really, really good question there. So the answer is no, it's desirable. Why not get on the waiting list? But don't worry if you haven't got it. Oh, I can't hear you. I can see that you're... Oh.
Switch the mic. There we go.
Oh, that's it. Now I can hear you.
It'll probably sound worse, but it's probably out of battery.
That's fine.
Yes. But if anything did change in the future and the syntax was slightly different, it's not like the knowledge you pick up in this course has gone to waste. You still have the basics of what to do. You just have to have a slightly different syntax, and we could record a scrim for you, so don't worry on that.
That's very true. Yeah, I think a lot of what we talk about in this course are things which are just generally applicable to using artificial intelligence APIs, prompt engineering for a start, the kind of information you need to be sending off to the API, the idea of what models are, and various other sort of settings, which, though I'm sure they will evolve over time, the concept is likely to stay very much the same. So as you say, it will be a case of just topping up your knowledge, like you would have to pretty much with any technology. They'll bring out React 17, then 18, then 19. You always have to just move with the times.
Exactly that. And for anyone wondering, like Ellie here, what are the prerequisites? We have a special section here for you to check out. Not very many, just HTML, CSS, and a little bit of JavaScript, and some knowledge of fetch requests, although that is covered in the course, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, get started if and when you're ready. And let's move on a bit then, Tom, to talk a bit more about chatbots. So we mentioned in our discussion about the course that there are 2 chatbots in here. One is a kind of general one using GPT-4, and then the other one is a fine-tuned one. How does that actually work, and how can we use AI for chatbots?
Yeah, so basically, you need well, AI for chatbots in general is very, very simple, because I think all of the OpenAI models that work with text, you could use to make a chatbot, because they all give really, really good answers. The first problem that you have when working with a chatbot is that the OpenAI models themselves do not have any memory of your conversation. So if you say to them, I don't know, where was the Olympics held in 1980? And it will give you an answer, and almost definitely a correct answer. And then if you say who won the gold medal in the 100-meter sprint, it actually won't know what Olympics you're talking about or what race you're talking about. So it will give you just some, what we call a hallucination, basically. It will make up a linguistically plausible answer. So in terms of working with chatbots, the only sort of slightly tricky thing, and it's not really that tricky at all for anyone who's got a bit of JavaScript, is that you need to keep on building the conversation. So what you're doing is every time you speak to the chatbot, you're not just sending your latest question, you're sending the previous reply, the question that was an answer to, etc., going right back. So each time your prompt is getting bigger and bigger, and you're sending more and more information. On the older models, that can be a bit of a problem, because they have tighter limits in actually how much information you can send them. So it will get to a point where you just get an error and the thing will stop working. Could also happen with GPT-4, but the limit there is something huge. I mean, you'd have to be speaking to this chatbot, you know, something like the length of a book, sort of 60,000 words or something. Yeah, you probably should interact with humans at some point a bit.
It's a very specific question you've got there, if it's that long.
Yes. But then I suppose if you were asking it to write you an essay, if you were doing a bit of cheating, and it gave you an essay, and then you asked it to make some changes, and, you know, there was a bit of back and forth, I suppose it could happen if it was really, really long. So it's something to be aware of if you are making sort of production chatbots. When it comes to fine tuning, that the kind of the core of fine tuning is the data, basically. And there are various things that you can do with fine tuning. For a chatbot, you basically, what you have to do is get a load of data which is formatted in a way where you've got a load of questions and a load of answers, and you give it that. You use, as I say, we open up the terminal or the command line prompt, and we use this special OpenAI tool. And in fact, we use two tools. The first one will take in your data set, and it will do a bit more formatting with it, stuff that would be very sort of boring for you to do yourself, basically organizing it into a format where there's JSON data on each line. That's the format it wants. Plus some kind of specifics, spaces here and there, and a few sort of separators and things that we talk about in the course. And once it's prepared that data, you then pass that data up to the API, and the API does a number of passes on it. It basically just keeps going over it until it's learnt it. Well, we talk about that more in the course. You know, if you don't tell it to go through it enough times, it won't learn it very well, and then you have some really quite strange conversations with it. But that's the process of fine-tuning. What you get at the end of that is your own model, custom made to you. So instead of using a model like GPT-4, you'll have a model called something like DaVinci today's date, or something along those lines. And that will be your own model, which only you can use, only somebody with your API key can use. And that will be trained on the data that you created. Now, there are sort of minor shortcomings with the apps in the course, in that to get that working really, really well, ideally you want a lot of data. Two ways of getting that. I mean, you could do a massive scraping exercise. And I don't know, maybe as Scrimba branches out into the back end, we might sort of consider courses in that, I'm sure, at some point. Quite an interesting thing to do. The other is perhaps you already work in an organization where you've got loads of records of customer service or billing inquiries or what have you. Then you have the quite boring task of human verification. OpenAI do really strongly suggest that you get a lot of data and you have a human check it for accuracy, because obviously OpenAI has no way of knowing if what it says there about your returns policy is true or not. I mean, a customer service agent could have made a mistake. So you want to make sure that the data is quality data. In the app that we build here, we're only using about a bit less than 40 points of data. And really, something like 300 would be better and 3,000 would be ideal. So what we're doing is we're getting it working. We show the principle. It definitely does work. But yeah, if this was really a production level app, you would want a lot more data. Yeah, in terms of learning, you don't need so much data at all, and you can see the principle, and it works really well. Oh,
That's
I've lost
awesome.
your sound again.
Muted myself that time. Yeah. A few interesting questions coming in. Dallas is asking, Tom, what was the most surprising thing you found when making this course?
I'd say overall, how easy it is to use artificial intelligence in apps, probably.
Good. That's what we want to hear.
Yeah. Specifically, was most surprising. I remember the most frustrating thing that I found, actually, which is not quite the question, but I'll tell you anyway, is that when you use the image generating API, so there's a create image endpoint, and that's basically what's driving the Dall-E app for people that have used it. When you use that, the images it gives you actually only exist for about an hour. After that, they get deleted. So if you're doing what I did when I recorded, and you take the URL and you stick it in an image tag and you expect it to display in your site, it will, and you record your lesson, and then you watch your lesson the next day and it's not there anymore. So something to to watch out for if you find yourself using that. You need to download the image, and there's a way of doing that, and we talk about that in the course. But that was kind of surprising. But yeah, basically it gives you the option of downloading it, of giving you a URL, which will lead to the image, or of giving you a base64 encoded version of the image. And I'd never really worked with base64 encoded images before. I think I was vaguely aware that they existed, but basically it gives you the image as a massive piece of data, which if you try and log it out in Scrimba, just kind of crashes your browser and everything. So it's a little bit tricky to work with. But yeah, that was something which came as a surprise to me, let's say.
But good thing to come across while you're learning, so that when you reach that roadblock in production, you'll be like, I know what to do.
Yeah, definitely.
Mika's wondering, and this is a very interesting question, which spoken languages are supported with ChatGPT? Would one be able to get all the same responses, fine-tune and so on, using languages other than English?
Yeah, really, really good question. So one of the apps that I considered for this course, and I'm actually kind of sad didn't end up in the course, but I'm really hoping I'll make into a either a solo project, or if one day we need to make an addition to the course, was a kind of a language app doing a bit of translation and a bit of simplification. And so I did experiment with different languages. Now, I think OpenAI themselves, the last time I checked, which was a while ago, suggested that English, and I think they said English, Spanish, and Japanese were the languages it was most comfortable with. Mm-hmm. In my experiments, and I don't speak the languages well enough, to be able to judge it, but that it seemed to make a pretty good job of translating into anything, certainly French, German. Yeah, it seemed pretty good. In the docs, they do talk about fine-tuning in other languages somewhere, only a line or two. They don't say too much about it, but they certainly don't say it's impossible. And I think the way that OpenAI works and large language models in general work is that they're figuring out the likelihood of different chunks of language coming in sequence. So to that extent, it might, I'm sure it does matter to some extent what language it's talking in, but I think that also means that it just becomes applicable to languages in general, because as long as it's had enough exposure to those languages, then it should understand what what it's looking at, and be able to, or not really understand what it's looking at, but see the patterns in the language and learn from those patterns, and then produce language in the same patterns, which is basically what it does in English. So why not do that in any other language? Honestly, not sure how it copes with languages which don't use the Latin alphabet. As I say, Japanese, it's said to work with very well. And I was watching a bit of the Google live stream last night, and they were talking about their Bard, and that they certainly said was working very well in Korean. So yeah, I think language support is probably not a problem, or not a very big problem.
Good to know. Yeah. Food Tech Life has a question about prompt engineering. This is mentioned as one of the learnings in the course. Food Tech Life is asking, did you think about this course leading people to being a prompt engineer? But let's rewind a bit. What is prompt engineering, Tom? And is this a course that someone who wants to be a prompt engineer might consider doing?
Yeah, definitely. So basically, when you're working with artificial intelligence, you need to ask it for something. You ask it a question, or you ask it to do something, or you ask it to compare things, or you're always requiring it to, you have something that you want from it. And that question that you put to it, or that request you make, is the prompt. So a prompt can be very, very simple. A prompt can be, who invented the World Wide Web, or something like that. Just a straightforward piece of general knowledge. So yeah, at the most basic level, a prompt is just a question. Now, prompt engineering is basically the art of writing prompts, and they can go to be something quite complicated. So the sort of next level of complexity might be that you're going to ask for something, and you're then going to give some examples about, to basically just to show the API what it is you're looking for. So a good example of that might be, you want some promotional tweets. Okay, you're going to tweet out some tweets that are just going to be part of your advertising campaign. So what you might do is take a bunch of tweets from your previous advertising campaign, and then say, okay, please write me 10 tweets. Here's the product information that I want. And then here are some examples of how those tweets might look based on previous things I've done. That's the style I want. That's like the kind of my house style. That's what I want it to be like. So when you do that, the model will pick up on those examples, and it will be very, very good at replicating that style and the length of text and the complexity and things like that. Maybe you've aimed them at teenagers, or maybe they're aimed at computer scientists, or what have you. And so that's just a way of getting more from the AI, really. So prompt engineering is the art, or science, more of an art, I guess, of getting as much as possible, as quickly as possible from the model. And yeah, it's bound to be an important skill. Whether we go so far down the road as it becomes a complete job in its own right, that's what you do. You're a prompt engineer, full stop. I mean, I'm sure there are already some, but whether that becomes a very, very mainstream thing which is actually more common than being a developer, that remains to be seen. But certainly prompt engineering and getting the most out of it is a very good skill. And in fact, our colleague Treasure is at the moment working on a course all about using artificial intelligence to help you write code. And so there will be a lot of prompt engineering in that that's sort of specific to developers, but applications all over the place. But yeah, it's something which is very easy to get into, and I'm sure as the future unfolds, it will become more and more sort of specialized and complex, or maybe not. Maybe it will all stay very, very easy. We'll see.
Remains to be seen. Thank you for the interesting question. Food Tech Life. Back onto the topic of how ChatGPT and I guess other AI copes with different languages. Some user experiences coming in. Harish has been juggling between English, German, and basic Portuguese since moving to Portugal. They, as in the AI, was pretty good with intermediate levels in these languages, but not too sure about the grammar and sophistication of them. So that's interesting.
Okay,
and
interesting.
Candy code. My dad had ChatGPT write a beautiful poem for my mum in Spanish. I was blown away. Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, poetry is something that ChatGPT seems to do very, very well.
Yeah. A couple of times I've said, write a new song from XYZ band. And depending on the lyrical complexity the bands typically use, it can come up with some pretty believable stuff, actually. So,
and when you did that, were you just telling it the name of the band, or did you paste in some lyrics from the band?
No, just the name, reasonably well-known band. So if it's just someone from your local pub, it probably wouldn't work.
No, sure.
Like Pink Floyd or something.
Yeah.
No, I'm not saying it wrote lyrics as well as Pink Floyd did. We're not there yet. But it does come up with some interesting things.
Yeah.
Interesting. Let's move on now to a question which is coming up a few times lately in our live events, which is, should we be worried about AI taking our jobs? By which I mean, well, developer jobs, maybe jobs in general. What's your take on this, Tom?
I think all the evidence at the moment is no. You shouldn't be worried about it. Basically, there's a few ways we could get into this. I mean, I think first and foremost, what is the current state of AI good for at the moment in terms of code? It's a very, very useful tool. It's good for checking your code if you've got a bug. It's good for checking your code if you haven't got a bug, but you think it might not be as good as it could be. It can certainly give you some helpful suggestions and ideas. It's good for writing some basic code. You want to set up a whole load of HTML for an app you're making. Very, very helpful. I've spoken to a couple of people. I know Michael has also at the town hall chipped in on this a bit. It really is seen by developers at the moment as a useful tool. It increases your workflow, leaves you free to do other stuff. As of now, probably not really cutting down team members or cutting down on hiring. Whether that will change in the future is an interesting question. My personal feeling is that it's a bit unlikely to. And this was something, and I wish I'd written down, but I was driving at the time and I was just listening to a discussion on the radio. And I can't think I can't remember who it was that was speaking, but they were interviewing some experts. And one of them made the point of the technology that we're working with at the moment in AI, the large language model, and the way that works that I talked about earlier, which is basically about predicting patterns of language, whether that's human language or computer language. It's quite plausible that what we're doing at the moment is we're exploiting the large language model concept to pretty much what it will be able to do for us. And that the next big explosion of AI where it gets really, really powerful and really, really can outdo humans in multiple ways is actually not part of the large language thing. That's actually going to be a future progression, which may well be some years off because it is a fiendishly complicated thing to do. And a lot of people would probably even argue that it's barely possible to do. So I think what we're looking at the moment is some stuff which is pretty amazing, does have an impact on jobs and more on how we work, really. And as the previous questioner mentioned, with sort of prompt engineering and things, the type of work we do, I think, might well be impacted. But the idea of a developer is not something which is disappearing. And I think if you're worried about that, there's something interesting you can do, which might kind of, you know, give you a bit of peace of mind. And I tried this myself. Just open up a blank Scrim or whatever kind of editor you use, but a Scrim is really easy to do this. And allow yourself the knowledge that websites are made of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and that is all you know. Pretend that is all you know. You've got those 3 files, HTML, CSS, index.js. Then go to ChatGPT, tell it that you want a basic app. I tried it with a snake game because I saw somebody doing it on Twitter and claiming it worked really well. With your apparent zero knowledge that you're pretending you've got, just do what ChatGPT tells you to do. I found that as soon as you get into any complexity, however much you keep pasting in the error messages you get, etc., it really, really is a struggle. And because you're then looking at code that has not been written by you, which is 10 times harder looking at code that was written by you, you really see, you know, on the one hand, it is amazing. On the other hand, it isn't a developer. It's a development tool. And yeah, we can certainly see some quite, I mean, I remember at the OpenAI live event, there was technology where a hand-drawn outline of an app was then turned into a working app by the AI. Great, amazing technology, but for really complicated stuff at the moment, it just isn't there. And as I say, I think it is just heading in the direction of being something which is very, very useful to developers. And I think that answer would probably go for you know, the majority of jobs that come up in these discussions. You know, I mean, I know somebody who works in public relations, and they tweet a lot and they use social media a lot for their work. And because that's something that OpenAI can do so well, you might be thinking that their job is at risk. But realistically, you know, they go to the strategy meetings, they read the reports, they're part of the team that decides, you know, what the fundraising event is going to be, etc. The fact that they write loads of tweets is coming from the knowledge in their head, and you can't really just transpose that to an AI bot, unless that bot is also going to turn up to the meetings and do absolutely everything. So yeah, I think in terms of pure job losses, this is not going to be as impactful as, say, the generalized idea of sort of mechanization, where sort of jobs in warehouses and unloading ships and things that used to employ thousands and thousands of people are now done mechanically. I don't think this is on that scale in terms of job losses. I think it's on that scale in terms of how much of a epoch-defining moment it is. But in terms of job losses, I wouldn't worry too much, and I hope I don't live to regret saying that.
Someone said to me that it's going to remove the boring parts of work or the frustrating parts, not the work in itself. So hopefully it will mean that we can still be developers, but we won't get bogged down doing tedious stuff like, I don't know, writing SQL queries or whatever else isn't so much fun. You can just focus on the interesting stuff, basically.
Yeah, and not get caught up too much in bugs, because hopefully it will help you clear them more quickly.
Exactly. Yeah. Vladislav asks, who won a year's pro subscription in Twitter? What this is When the course dropped yesterday, we shared the good news on Twitter. This is Scrimba's Twitter page. And if you find the course launch tweet, I'll share the link here, and you retweet it, we will be selecting one or two. I don't actually remember what we said in the email now. At least one lucky retweeter to win a year's Scrimba Pro subscription. But the answer so far is no one, Vladislav, because we're choosing the winner next week. So there's still time, should you wish to get involved with sharing the good news about the course. Martin says, ChatGPT wrote my gym routine for 3 days a week, isolating every muscle group to maximize performance. Super cool. I used it, this is not as cool, to write a house cleaning checklist. Because you know when you want to clean, well, you don't want to, but you have to. And it just seems like such a huge task. I was like, well, maybe if I break it down into a checklist, it'd be easier to do. And it was. So yes, let us know what you've used ChatGPT for so far, whether it's writing poems for a loved one, or your gym, or your cleaning, or coming up with names for your new budgie. Yeah.
Really good idea for the gym routine, because I mean, that's exactly the kind of thing where there's loads of information on the internet, both about fitness, but also about anatomy. And yeah, I mean, be really interesting to know what a professional, maybe Martin is one, but what a professional fitness instructor or physio or somebody would make of it, and how accurate they thought it was. But yeah, interesting application. I suppose that does kind of highlight also a potential concern with this, in that it is a large language model that's predicting language. It's not knowledgeable. So it in a way, it speaks with a certain authoritarian sort of, with a kind of authoritative voice, let's say. It tells you things and you think, oh yeah, that's good. This thing really knows what it's talking about. I suppose worryingly, it doesn't necessarily know what it's talking about. So it could potentially tell you something which is a complete hallucination, but sounds plausible. And
yeah,
that, I suppose, is something that, as the future unfolds, we'll have to get to grips with AI. And obviously that's partly sort of the technology improving, but also us knowing that it's a tool, not a source of all knowledge as such, but a tool. Just like everything on Wikipedia is not true. In fact, I think the statistic of how much of Wikipedia is actually factually correct is quite a scarily large amount of it is not correct. So, you know, it's nothing that we're not used to.
Yeah. And I think this goes back to the question of, should we be worried about AI taking our jobs? Because at least at this time, as you said, Tom, it can tell us things which might not necessarily be true. And this is when you need a human on the other end of it to say, no, I shouldn't be hoovering the cat, actually. That's not what we do.
Yeah.
Which it comes back as well to the fine-tuning module in your course. So you can, train it on your own data. So it's not just kind of spewing out anything.
Yeah. Right. So no doubt, and probably they already exist, but apps which have been tuned on, more specific data, sort of trustworthy human check data, will then become better at things like that. And I'm sure, you know, newspapers and websites and news are going to be filled with stories of people doing silly stuff that ChatGPT told them to do. You know, like when SatNav came out, and there were all sorts of funny, and some maybe not so funny things. But I mean, I remember something about a lorry driver that was trying to get to Gibraltar, which, for those who don't know, is a tiny bit of British territory at the very bottom of Spain, about 8 miles from Morocco. It's also the name of a village in the north of England. And of course, the GPS took him to the wrong one. I mean, there's that sort of thing that I'm sure will be in the news before long.
Absolutely.
But I mean, but fascinating how, for example, though, in the medical field, things like looking at scans, I think they found that the artificial intelligence models are as accurate and much faster than trained doctors at doing that. So I mean, that's a fantastic application of it. So, you know,
That is interesting. Yeah.
It really is just about knowing the limits of the technology and, you know, being amazed by it on the one hand, but just, you know, keeping your feet on the ground and knowing what it's good for and when to use it.
Yeah. Harwich says, I do not think AI would end up replacing us. Maybe someone who knows how to use AI efficiently might replace us. Well, make sure you are that someone by getting started with learning AI now with Tom's brand new course. Yes, I think that's a nice summary, Harish. And Candy Code, who is a professional developer, says, at my job, I'm encouraged to use ChatGPT, and I do all the time. It's far from perfect, but it's helped me solve some coding issues by at least telling me what the error might be. So, like you were saying, Tom, it's a tool.
I think that exactly summarizes how ChatGPT is being used at the moment by developers. And long may it continue doing that.
Brilliant. Thank you for the insight there. Marley says, I'm creating my first React Native app. Someone recommended using AI. Bad idea?
Well, why would that be a bad idea? I mean, I suppose when you say you're creating your first React Native app, I suppose that the concern there, coming from people who work in education, is going to be exactly the same as concern I would have if you had gone to Stack Overflow, you had found a bunch of code, you copied it, you pasted it, you ran it, it worked, and you were like, hey, I've created my first React Native app, when you didn't really understand what was going on, you didn't write it yourself. So yeah, I think using AI as a learning tool is a really, really good idea. But as long as you've got the discipline to use it as a learning tool, not use it as a laziness tool. So if your first React Native app is something which you understand, if you're perhaps doing something really sensible, which is maybe writing out the code yourself and not just copying and pasting it, making sure you understand every part of it, and you're using AI either to introduce you to new topics and explain what they mean, or explain code that you don't understand, or you're putting in error messages and putting in your code which didn't work and trying to get back, you know, why that didn't work, then I think that's a very, very good idea. It's only a bad idea if you're not, if your aim is to learn something and you're not learning, then it's a bad idea.
Good summary. Thank you for the question there, Marley. We've talked a bit about chatbots and how that's one of the most common uses for AI. Perhaps you could enlighten us, Tom, or what other uses of AI are we most likely to come across in web development?
So I suppose chatbots and sort of visual assistants are the first thing that springs to mind, but there's plenty of other stuff actually, which might be sort of visible in websites or might not be so visible in websites. Personalization is one thing, and obviously for a long time now, you go to something like Amazon and you'll see a whole load of recommendations. Well, you can probably imagine that AI is going to play an increasing role in, well, in this case, getting you to part with your money by putting things in front of you that they think you're going to like, or information that you think you're going to find interesting. I mean, and this again is an extension of what YouTube's been doing for ages, right? Just trying to get you to stay on the site longer and longer by, hey, watch this video, which is just the same thing as you just watched, but a little bit more in this direction. You know, it's just about kind of personalizing things and getting recommendations going. And I think AI is going to become more involved in that by, I guess, sort of in the early days of that, when Amazon, I'm sure they've been doing that for years. It's very much like, okay, you've read this book, well, then you'll probably like this book, because most people who read this book also like that book. Whereas now, I think there'll be much more sort of behavior analysis going on, and just sort of the ability to have a much better understanding of the customer or the client, and what their wants and needs are likely to be. So I think that's going to be a really, really big field. I think the other is in content generation itself. I mean, obviously, natural language processing, it works both ways. So in terms of content generation, most people I know who work in that field, whether they're anything to do with web development or not, are making good use of ChatGPT for that. But I think that will also become much more evident in terms of your interaction with websites, and the ability really to communicate much more with a website, rather than it purely being about clicking on buttons and following links. And I think a big player in that is going to be with the voice. I don't think people want to be typing conversations with their website. I think working with a chatbot, to get some specific information is definitely useful. But I think voice recognition and applications of AI in that are going to become very, very big in web development. And I think likewise with images and video, and again, a two-way street, partly about sort of recognition of you and your images, and partly about image generation and the actual images which are being displayed on the website, on the website. So yeah, data analysis, I think it is obviously something which is already huge, but artificial intelligence is going to become more and more involved in. I think the ability of being able to give it a load of data and then get sense out of that data is something that we're going to see a lot more used in websites. And I think as web developers, we're not, generally speaking, sort of number crunchers or kind of people who would program a large language model themselves. But I think what we'll see as web developers is these things becoming available to us in APIs like OpenAI, which actually probably make our lives quite simple to involve ourselves with those things. So I think it will be interesting, but I don't think it will actually be particularly kind of scary or anything. I think there'll be plenty of uses as well that we haven't thought of.
Looking forward to seeing that. Yeah.
I also think, sorry, worth a mention is we talked a little bit about using AI with code, but I think in terms of optimizing as a developer, as you're developing, optimizing your code, optimizing it for speed, security checking, testing in general, I think, and as you said earlier, get rid of the boring tasks. Most people don't like testing very much.
Yeah.
Something that will hopefully be something you just pass it on to AI. It will happily do it all day and all night, and you won't have to.
Yeah, brilliant stuff. So once again, here's the link to Tom's brand new Scrimba course about building AI apps. Subash says, your course is really helpful. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Subash.
Just to finish off, Akshay says, could you share some idea on what's coming with Scrimba 2.0? Well, it's all under wraps at the moment, but I can tell you it will be faster, better, stronger, and more exciting to use. We are releasing a brand new version of the Scrimba site in the next couple of months, no fixed date yet. If you would like to be among the first to get your hands on the new Scrimba, put your email in here, and it's going to be super cool. So looking forward to that.
And we're hoping to use some AI, maybe not in the initial release of Scrimba 2.0, but there's certainly been some experimentation going on, which is pretty impressive.
Yes, absolutely. It's going to be super cool. Well, I think that's all we've got time for now, Tom. Thank you for joining, and congrats again on your exciting new course. Looking forward to looking at it myself. And yeah, thank you all for watching and your brilliant questions. I'll see you next time.
Thank you very much. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.